Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Science Terminology. Today, we're going to be talking about the phenomenon known as the tragedy of the commons, which is something that people study mostly in biology and environmental science. It's an important concept, and it has a great application for government and policy and stuff like that. So, we're going to talk a little bit about it and learn what it's all about. So basically, the definition of a tragedy of the commons situation is basically any time where individuals would use a common resource according to their own self-interest, contrary to the common good. Basically, anytime that you have a bunch of people who have free access to something, they're going to use it according to their own self-interest instead of trying to make sure they maintain it for the common good. And ultimately, overuse will cause the depletion of the resource. And this was originated by William Forster Lloyd in 1833, and he was talking mostly about the English commons, which is where farmers and peasants could have their farm animals graze. But it can be applied to other things as well. So here's an example of what a tragedy of the commons situation might be, right? There are this place in the United States called the Great Banks, and it's home to many of the salmon in our country. However, overfishing of the salmon and the damming of the rivers for water has destroyed the Great Banks and hampered salmon population, right? These are individual actors acting in their own self-interest and not in the common good, right? Which is having the biodiversity and the salmon population thrive in this area. Another example might be the night sky. So it used to be clearly visible everywhere on the planet, but it has inspired generations of humans and helped fauna and flora. And like Greek myths and all that all come from the night sky and like the constellations and all that. Well, human development has made it increasingly difficult to see the night sky clearly or at all. And it's really destroyed this cultural or scientific resource, right? People are acting in their own self-interest and destroying something that could be used for the common good. So that's another example of a tragedy for the common situation. And then our final little example here. The area around Earth is relatively open and clear from natural space debris. But as we have launched more and more satellites into orbit, there's been a buildup of space debris that is man-made, right? As satellites fail or fall apart, they continue to rotate through around the Earth, or pieces fall off, and now there's just kind of this cloud of debris around the Earth of satellite junk, basically. And this has really eliminated scientific observation, right? We can't see as much because there's this junk floating in the way. And it's also made it more difficult to launch new satellites to replace the obsolete ones because there's all this junk everywhere, and we don't want the new satellite to get hit by, chunks of metal or old satellites or all that kind of stuff. So we've used up this finite resource by following our own self-interests. So what are some solutions to the commons tragedy? Well, oftentimes the only true way to prevent a commons tragedy is to implement some sort of regulation on the commons so that individual users can't damage the resource. And that can take lots of different forms. That can mean some sort of enforcement mechanism, punishments for overuse, taxes, all sorts of different things. There's tons of ways to regulate a common good, a common resource. Now, these regulations make it so that individual actors, right, can't fully explore their self-interest, but the resources that are finite can be saved and continually used for future generations. Kind of like those examples we talked about, right? The salmon population, the night sky, the area around the Earth where we have satellites, right? All those things could have been, if they had been regulated, could have been saved a little bit better. So thank you so much for learning a little bit about the tragedy of the commons. It's an important concept in both government and science, and it's an important one to understand moving forward as our resources that are finite become more and more finite. How can we regulate them to make them usable for generations? Please go ahead and subscribe and come back for more science terminology. We'll see you soon.